Good afternoon. This is Maggie Barlow from the AMSAT office, and I want to welcome you all to the 16th of our weekly Taking Time to Connect Zoom chats. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little tour of our chat room. If you're on your PC, you will see the control icons at the bottom of the screen. If you don't see them, move your cursor to the bottom of the Zoom screen and they should show up. If you're on a tablet or iPad, tap the screen and you'll see the control icons. And if you're on your smartphone, just swipe the screen across to see the controls. You're currently muted. If you are on your laptop, you can move your cursor to the bottom of the screen and click on that little microphone icon to unmute yourself. If you're on a tablet, double tap the screen to find the microphone. And if you're on your phone, just swipe. Same options for starting and stopping your video. The directions are the same, just look for the camera icon. You should also see a chat icon. We'll be using this feature for questions and suggestions. Just click on the icon and the chat screen should open up to the right of your screen, unless you're in full screen mode, and then it will open up in the middle. To send a question or a suggestion for a topic, type in the bottom and hit enter, and please share it with everyone. We also have a participants icon at the bottom, and if you click on that, you will see response icons, including a blue hand, which you'll use to raise your hand to ask questions when we get to that part of our presentation. We are using the latest version of Zoom with new security settings, and a new feature on the icons is a little reaction tab, which allows you to plug in a reaction right on your own screen when you want to give an opinion about what's being said. Now, we do have a very short poll today before we get our session started. So I'm going to bring that up here, and if you would just take a few minutes to go ahead and answer those 3 questions, we would appreciate that. We are recording the chat today, and we'll post the recording on the AMSAT website on the Taking Time to Connect page. I'll show you where that is at the end of our session today. And I'll have more information about that and other resources at the end of our chat. So we'll just wait maybe another 30 seconds to give everybody the chance to answer the questions. Then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll now. Almost all of you have responded, so I'm going to share the results with you. The first question regarding, do you want to start teaching again? It looks like a large majority of you are interested in that, but most of you don't feel prepared to do so. And hopefully our conversation today is going to give you some good information. And then the last question, in the past 2 months, have you attended any personal service appointments? And 64% of you have. So those are our results. And I am now going to turn things over to Lisa Levinson, our board chair, who is our host today.
Well, I'm your initial host, and then we're going to turn everything over to Cheryl in a minute. But I want to welcome everybody to this chat. And based on those initial survey results, it looks like a lot of people are interested in teaching in person pretty soon. And there are people obviously who have already started or have thought a lot about it. And so the purpose of today's session is not to have any debate about whether we should be teaching or not teaching in person, because that's individual choice and based on where you live. But if you're interested in doing that or curious about how to start doing it safely, we're having people talk to us today about how they're doing it. So it should be a good discussion. And now, Cheryl.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody for coming together again for this chat. This is sort of a follow-up to a very excellent presentation that Jeremy Corr gave us, I think almost 2 months ago now. And after that chat, I wanted to continue the discussion and ask Jeremy and Gabrielle, Czaja, who's presenting today, to continue the conversation with me in the hopes of formulating some guidance, some guidelines to put forward for our members for when each of us might feel ready to get back into teaching in person. I also asked some of our Canadian colleagues in Alexander Technique Canada to join in the conversation. And so I want to thank Jeremy and Gabrielle and David Owen, especially for David sharing the work that he did in pulling together some guidelines for Alexander Technique Canada. And David is on the call today, so let me just ask David to wave and introduce him, or just say hello. So that, David, can you just wave and say hello? Just want to
Unmute myself.
Unmute.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, very good.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And also, Jeremy, I see Jeremy's name here. I had thought that he wasn't going to be able to attend, but I'm very happy to see. And so, Jeremy, if you could just say hello also.
Hello.
Hi there, Jeremy. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, and thank you for the initial chat that you hosted, because I think this is a result of it in some ways, that people have been really thinking about this. And so it's great that you're here.
I'm pleased it was helpful. Thank you.
Yes. So we in AMSAT have not yet come up with any formal recommendations, but I think that this chat is kind of part of our process, because my sense is that people are just sort of poking their heads up out of the sand and looking around and wanting to hear what other people are doing. And there are some brave souls who have started to teach in person, and with a lot of thought and with some very thoughtful protocols. And so I would like to first turn this over to Gabrielle, who is coming from a very rich background in physical therapy and Alexander Technique. So she has a lot of background and thoughts about this. And then there have been some members who have started and who've offered to share their experience. That would be Lauren Hill and Michaela Hauser-Wagner and Ruth Rootberg. And so we will have each person talk, and then at the end, we'll leave maybe about 25 minutes or so for questions and just back and forth discussion. If you have a burning question while somebody is speaking or after somebody has spoken, you can put it in the chat.
So they can't hear me.
And
Okay.
and you can, and Maggie will keep track of those questions for us. So I'm going to then turn it over now to Gabrielle, and thank you.
Is Gabrielle muted, perhaps?
Gabrielle? Gabrielle?
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. So it's great that a significant majority of people want to start teaching, and hopefully today, by the end of our time together, we will have shared a lot of ideas about how we can move forward. This is the beginning of a conversation. You know, Jeremy started this great conversation several months ago, and then Jeremy and Cheryl and I continued it. And So our goal today is to educate and empower you to make the best decision for yourself and your students. We all have different teaching situations. We have different home situations. So every single person is going to make their own decision for their best possible situation for them and their student and their family. So that being said, this is not an imperative to begin teaching. Your comfort and safety and that of your student is primary in your consideration for teaching in person. I don't know about all of you, but I think that the media is full of a lot of information, and it's hard to sift through sometimes what we need to pay attention to. And so we want to pay attention to what are best and common practices happening right now, knowing that things are changing, and also making decisions based on what we love to do, our desire to teach and help our students, rather than worrying about what might happen. So if we're prepared, we can minimize risk and then move forward. And of course, none of this is set in stone. You know, this is all a bit movable. And so as time goes on, we'll all be making adjustments. For example, I was looking at my consent form today and realized that I needed to change something. As I'm bringing students very slowly back into the office, I'm finding that on the spot, I'm having to tweak things here and there. So I think that this is how it's going to go going forward. Maggie, can we go to the next slide? Okay, great. All right, so before we get into really kind of the meat of what we're going to talk about, what I thought we would do is just do a little bit of movement first, get ourselves out of the chairs and get a little prepared to do a little bit of learning. So I'm gonna orient my computer, and if everybody could stand up if possible, and if you don't want to stand up, you can stay seated, that's fine. Can everybody see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I sometimes use Brain Gym for my students, especially on Zoom. And if you don't know about Brain Gym, there are some different movements that can help prepare for learning at all different levels, seeing, hearing, moving. And so we're just gonna start with something called brain buttons. So go ahead and put your hand below your navel. And then take your middle finger and your thumb and just give yourself a good massage underneath your collarbone. So just getting that first and second rib underneath your collarbone, and then switch hands. And you can do this seated if you don't want to stand. Great. Now the next thing we're going to do is a cross crawl. So first we're going to pause and connect. Send your back and up. Send your head forward and up. Ask yourself, are you seeing? Are you balancing? Are you breathing? So this is called a cross crawl. We're just bringing one hand to one knee. You can do this sitting if you want. This gets the left and right side of our brains organized. And then if you want to do a little bit more, you can bring an elbow to a knee. Great. And then come back and pause. And now go ahead and taking your fingers at the top of your earlobes, go ahead and just massage your earlobes and give them a good yank. And I'm going to lose my Bluetooth earbuds, so I'll just do one ear. But don't be afraid to really yank on your ears. So just really massage 3 times. Okay, great. So now we're a little bit more integrated. So there's a lot of, Maggie, can we have the slides again? Great, thank you. So a little bit of historical background. Hand washing as we know it didn't start or wasn't even thought of until the late 1840s. There was a physician in Vienna that was observing that women in childbirth were dying in the clinic where medical residents were practicing, and they weren't dying in a clinic where the female midwives were practicing and delivering babies. And over a lengthy process, what he discovered was that the medical residents were doing autopsies in the morning and then going into the clinic in the afternoon and birthing babies. And so he began to make the connection that disease was being transferred from the autopsy in the morgue into the delivery room. And what is unfortunate and very interesting is he was pretty much laughed out of the community, and he was ostracized because he was suggesting that physicians needed to do something different, or that there was something that they were doing that was contributing to the death of all these women in childbirth. So it was many, many years, and it wasn't really until the 60s and 70s that what we call universal precautions in the medical community, which originally had to do with bloodborne pathogens, first came into being. So hand washing is a relatively new thing in terms of best practices for staying healthy. 30 years ago, when I was just starting out as a physical therapist, we had to do a lot of training about what universal precautions were. And I'm being a little bit flip, but for a good reason. And universal precautions basically boils down to, if it's wet and it's not yours, don't touch it. And so now we have a situation where we have a respiratory vector and it's wet, so we don't want to touch it. So what we're going to do is simply present how we can minimize our risk. So the way that I chose to organize how we're going to think about this is what we want to do to prepare our students, what happens at the time of the lesson, and then what do we do after a lesson. So there's a lot of different pieces to this. So the first thing that we want to do is communicate expectations and precautions ahead of time. And the general communications that you want to do with your student are writing them a letter, sending them an email, giving them a phone call, and telling them what to expect. And I understand that Ruth, Rootberg, and Michaela Hauser are going to share some of their experience with this. Putting something in writing is recommended. And then also have them sign a consent form. And what you're going to put in writing and what you want to have them put in a consent form is that students are acknowledging that they understand that close contact with people increases the risk of infection from COVID-19. By signing this form, I acknowledge that I'm aware of the risks involved and give consent to receive lessons. Now, all of this is in the context of educating a student about what they can expect, how you're protecting yourself, and how you're going to protect them. And that's what we're talking about. So before your student comes to the office, you're going to want to ask them a couple of questions about what their exposure, if any, has been with COVID. Have they been wearing a mask? Have they traveled? How large groups of people that they've been in, that sort of thing. What I'm doing is I'm sending out a form and a signed consent form ahead of time. And if there's something on there that has me a little bit concerned, then I'm going to call that student and just have a conversation. A couple of weeks ago, I had a student tell me that she's now returning to work on the Metro, and I got a little concerned about that, and she explained everything to me, and then I thought, okay, this is good. She's being very thoughtful about how she is handling her time out in public. And then again, within 24 hours, you're going to ask that question again. So if you set up an appointment a week ahead of time, you're going to just want to make some inquiries ahead of time. Maggie, next slide. Okay. So one of the things that we suggest that you ask your student to do is to arrive no later than their scheduled time. One best way to minimize risk for yourself and for your students is to create some space in between each lesson. And we'll get to this later, but you're going to want to create some space in between each student coming in so that your students are not crossing paths and so that you've got some time to clean up and sanitize everything. If you don't have a reception room, you can ask your student to wait in the car, or maybe there's a lobby and then the teacher can text or call a student when they're ready. You know, if a student is arriving via public transit, then some of these details are going to be needed to sort it out. You know, with the nice weather going on, maybe there's an outdoor waiting area for students to be in. Every single time you see the student, it's recommended that you use an infrared thermometer to take a temperature at the forehead. Right now, an infrared thermometer is one of the best ways to kind of sort of check to see if that person might be sick. There's a lot of literature out there that says a temperature may or may not indicate whether or not somebody is carrying the COVID virus. We know that, you know, 30% of the people that are asymptomatic might be carriers of COVID. However, if we're doing a couple of things to monitor, taking a temperature is one of those things that's being done fairly much across the board. If a temperature is higher than 100.4 degrees, you would ask that student to go home and call their physician. As far as PPE, we now have a new phrase, personal protective equipment for the student and the teacher. Students need to wear masks and face coverings the entire time in the teacher's premises. Same goes for the teacher. The teacher is going to wear a mask or a face covering the entire time a student is in the office. Teacher needs to wash his or her hands prior to putting the mask on, and then after you've taken the mask off, go ahead and wash your hands. What's happening in the larger therapy community, and I've polled a lot of therapists from some working groups that I'm in that are looking at physical therapists and massage therapists across the country. The mask is the one consistent thing. Some people are using gloves. Some people are using face shields or goggles. Some people are putting on disposable gowns. Some people are coming in, wearing the clothes to teach, and then taking off those clothes before going home. If you want to use gloves, you can use gloves. You want to wash your hands before and after you take them off. You need to sanitize according to CDC instructions, goggles, and face shields if you're going to want them. So there's choosing to wear something other than a mask is going to be at your comfort level. So there's no wrong or right answer with any of this. And I think that's the most important thing to continue to think about as we're going through. Hand washing is the single most important thing that we can do. I've got a sign on the front door to my office. I've got a sign that kind of has some general lightweight Alexander instructions so people can be giving direction while they're washing their hands in the bathroom sink. I've got hand sanitizer in the reception, hand sanitizer in the bathroom, hand sanitizer in my studio room. So the hand washing is the single most important thing that all of us can do. In terms of giving a lesson with your hands-on student, students are going to be pretty much fine that you want to teach. Now you might have students, or you yourself may not be quite ready to put hands on student, but one option is you could tell students that you're going to be directing a lesson without hands-on, but you'll still be in the same room together. So it's kind of like an intermediary between doing a Zoom, but you're going to have a little bit more kinesthetic information. You're reestablishing that connection with your student. So even if you're in the same room together, maybe you're directing an activity, you might keep a little bit of distance, but that's another option. As far as payment goes, more and more people are using contactless payment methods. You can have your student pay ahead of time, pay after with Venmo, PayPal, Apple Cash is another thing. Many students use checks. I'm asking students to fill out their check ahead of time. So what we're trying to do is minimize the amount of time that we can, that's appropriate, that we are in contact with each other and in the presence of one another. So we've looked at preparing a student, what we're going to do ahead of time. We've looked at what can happen in a lesson. Now comes the big thing, which is, okay, a student leaves, how are we going to clean up? And this falls under the category of sanitizing. So before the student arrives, and this sounds like a lot, but we will get used to it. If I use the bathroom before my student comes in, I sanitize it with disinfectant. Every time a student leaves or uses the bathroom, I'm going to clean it. So basically, the bathroom is being used after every single time it gets used. You want to use disposable or washable table covers. I've got a sheet. And headrest covers if you use those. And you want to remove those after each student. There's two options for taking care of your really nice table that you do table lessons with. I've opted to go with the Home Depot version of a big piece of plastic that I can put a sheet on top of. And then after I take the sheet off, I spray the sanitizer germicide on. So that way I'm not ruining the cover. My understanding is that some of the companies that manufacture massage tables are manufacturing a cover that you can put on top of your table, and then that will tolerate being cleaned with a disinfectant, but it's not going to ruin the top of your table. I have plastic trash bags. They look better than you think, clear ones, on the fabric chairs in the reception room that I have. In the studio, when I'm doing chair work with a student, I have wooden chairs. What I've decided to do is purchase plastic or resin chairs so that those are easily cleaned, and I'm going to be not using the wood and worrying about ruining my chairs. So one of the things that I learned is that my super duper heavy, stinky Lysol spray is not necessarily what we call a germicide or a virucide. And this is something to pay attention to if we want to minimize risk and really make sure that the virus is, if it lands somewhere, if it happens to land somewhere, we're getting rid of it. And so there's a list of CDC approved, FDA approved germicides. It's a little bit challenging to find those, but it is possible to find those, and we can maybe talk about that later, or we can put that information in the community forum on the website. We're understanding that fresh air and circulation is really important. If you can have the door open, if you can have some windows open, a fan going, a HEPA air filter would be really good to have. That keeps things moving. And then after the student leaves, so you're cleaning off the table. If you've got chairs, you're going to sanitize the chairs. You also want to disinfect high-touch surfaces and any surface that the student comes into contact with. Doorknobs, the door to your studio, again, the washroom. You want to keep an eye on the floors, vacuum cleaning the floors every other evening. You know, this morning I had a student come in and his backpack went on the chair with the plastic covering on it. After he left, I sprayed the germicide and did that. So we've looked at preparing a student before a lesson, how do we minimize risk in the context of a lesson, and how to sanitize afterwards. Other considerations, Maggie, can you please bring on the next slide? We all have different working environments. You know, some of us are sharing offices, some of us work out of our home, some of us work in a second bedroom in our home. Some people have a separate entrance. So these are all things that, that we all need to take into consideration in terms of what we're feeling comfortable with as far as bringing students back into our space. And it can be done. It's just a matter of kind of thoughtfully going through all of the scenarios and really walking yourself through, okay, what's it gonna look like when a student calls? What's it gonna look like when a student comes in? What's it going to look like when a student leaves? If you're renting or sharing a space, get in touch with those professionals, find out what they're doing. Are their procedures and precautions going to be the same as yours? If you're teaching private lessons or group classes at institutions, you're going to want to check in and see what their guidelines are. They may be enough for you, they may not be enough for you. So these are all the different little pieces that each of us has to consider. Next slide, Maggie. So finally, one of the things that Lisa mentioned, and one of the things that Cheryl and Jeremy and I were discussing, and also David, is that these are common practices. And for the 64% of you that have been going to a personal service appointment, maybe you've gotten your hair done or your toes done, or you've gone to a medical appointment, these are all sort of the fairly consistent things that everybody is doing. But ultimately, it really boils down to what your state is requiring of you, what your county is requiring of you. And I encourage you to go to the primary sources. The CDC is the best, most important source. The malpractice insurance carrier, HPSO, has a great resource center, and I understand, I haven't seen it yet, but they've got a lot of really good frequently asked questions. Your state may have something like coronavirus.nj.gov. Here in DC, the District of Columbia has a website devoted strictly to coronavirus. Your county, your local town. So go to those websites, and you may have to dig a little bit deep. And that is the challenge of this, but you're also going to find that there are common threads running through all of this. I think that's it. That's it so far, Cheryl.
Cheryl, unmute, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That was just so detailed and comprehensive and much appreciated. Let me now turn this over to Lauren. We had a great conversation yesterday, and I was very moved and impressed with your process, and I'd like for you to share that with us.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank Jeremy for the presentation back in April with the questions. I really found that helpful to just, I kind of, after that meeting, I just put those questions in my head and let them sit because we didn't know what was going to happen. And I'll give you a little context. I live in Minnesota. We had a stay-at-home order for 7 weeks that ended toward the end of May. And then our businesses have slowly started to reopen, and like in many places, we're still in a process of that. So my first question to myself was, you know, because I'm not regulated like a restaurant is, you know, if I'm even going to consider reopening, what other type of business do I consider myself similar to in terms of being close to another person and for a certain duration of time? So when I teach privately, I typically teach 45-minute lessons, sometimes 30 minutes, but typically 45 minutes. And when I started asking myself that question, what I came up with was my hairdresser. When I see my hairdresser, it's a 45-minute appointment, and he spends the whole 45 minutes with me. And he is walking around and has his hands in my hair basically the whole time. And I would say that actually with the hairdresser, he is in closer physical contact with me for longer than I am with a student, because often in a lesson, something may transpire and then we sit down and talk about it, and so we're apart. Or I may ask the student to do something, or I may demonstrate something and we're not right next to each other. The other difference with the hairdresser, of course, is that you're in a salon with other hairdressers and other clients, whereas in a studio, you're just with you and your student. So I decided to follow, when Amar State said that hairdressers could open, that meant that I could consider it if I wanted to. Our hairdressers were allowed to open on June 1st at 25% capacity. They're now operating at 50% capacity. I wanted to wait at least a month after they opened before I considered seeing any students, for two reasons. One was that I wanted to see how the public, the people in our community, what their comfort level was with going to that type of appointment. And I also wanted to go to the hairdresser and see how I felt. And for me, that was actually more important, because I felt like if I went to see my hairdresser and I was anxious, stressed, nervous, uncomfortable, then for me, that meant that that was not right for me to even consider teaching. I've been to my hairdresser twice. It's been absolutely fine. So I decided in June that I would plan to reopen the week after July 4th, which was last week, pending things changing, of course. And so I started coming up with a plan. I don't know what it's like in the states where everybody else lives. In Minnesota, businesses that reopen have to have a plan in place. The plan does not have to be submitted to any agency for approval, but you have to have a plan. And so there's a lot of stuff on the Minnesota State's website targeted at different business sectors, but also they have templates and stuff for creating a plan. So I waded through all of that, and I used their template to start coming up with something for my studio. For me, there really were two factors in that plan. One, of course, is what, like a lot of the things that Gabrielle talked about, what were things that I could put into place that would help to reduce the risk of transmission of the virus. Nothing is going to be 100% risk-free, okay? But what can I do to reduce it? And two, to acknowledge the amount of fear that is around, and to what can I do to help my students be comfortable? Because if a student is not comfortable, they shouldn't be in here. So some of the things that I've done in terms of, my number one thing is, of course, if they have any symptoms at all, that they need to stay home. If anybody in their household has symptoms, they need to stay home. And I have always had a 24-hour cancellation policy but I've always been flexible when it comes to terms of people getting sick, in the middle of the day when they're at work and they have a lesson with me at 4 o'clock and can't give me 24 hours notice. That hasn't just been the case now, but always, because I'm always wanting to instill good practice with my students for taking care of themselves. So I never dock anybody for canceling last minute because they start coming down with something in the middle of the day. And so I've just kind of really emphasized that with any student that wants to come back now. Both my student and I wear a mask while we're here. I have a bathroom that's connected to my studio, and everybody needs to come in and wash their hands thoroughly before we do anything. I do have hand sanitizer, but it's my understanding that the hand washing is the best thing. If you don't have that, hand sanitizer can work, but they start by washing their hands. As I said, most of my lessons are 45 minutes, and sometimes, I book my students on the hour, but sometimes in a normal situation, we may have a question at the end of the lesson and we run over a little bit, or they need to write their check, or we're just chatting a little bit. And sometimes I may run up to when the next student's lesson starts. And I've just made it clear to them that I need to cut it off at 45 minutes because I need the time to clean things up so that they have time to leave before the next student comes. And I need to be really strict with that. I did invest in a bunch of flat sheets to cover my table with that I can wash and change out between students. I did purchase an air purifier with a HEPA filter for my studio. I did a lot of reading about it beforehand. You know, I don't know, they keep trying to figure out what size particles are carrying the virus. So I'm not 100% sure that that is helpful, but I have allergies anyway, and I never had an air purifier in my room before, so it was a decent investment. And if it makes people feel more comfortable, then that's a good, I think. So in terms of making students feel more comfortable, exactly what Gabrielle said, I think it's really clear to be upfront with the student what to expect when they come in. And so it's on my website, but when they get an email about their lesson reminder, all of that is stated out. I want them to call me if they have any questions about it. I know when I had to go to the eye doctor, they were very clear with me what to expect when I came in, and it was really reassuring to me. So, you know, I think that's probably one of the biggest things, is just to let them know what to expect. Also, I'm not scared, you know, and I think if you are feeling scared, you're not ready to consider teaching again. You know, I think in other situations in my life, I might push myself when I'm in a scary situation because it helps me to grow, but this is not a situation, I think, to push yourself. If you're not ready, you're not ready. And I also, because I just started teaching again, I've asked my students who have come in to let me know if there's anything that's, you know, how I'm doing things that's making them uncomfortable, because I'm going to need to, you know, tweak things. And as we learn more things about the virus too, things may need to change. So that's another way that I'm trying to help them feel more comfortable. So lastly, I just want to say, and Gabrielle touched on this too, everybody has a unique situation for many different reasons. And one of them is simply your teaching space. So I know some of you that are on the call, I live in an old house. I have my teaching space in my basement, and the students enter a side entrance from the house. The house is completely closed off from my students. The bathroom is downstairs and only used by my students and myself if I use it. So it's different if you teach in your living room, or if you're in a small apartment and they have to walk through your house to get to a second room. So there are lots and lots of things to consider, and I think we all have to respect how people are, each of us is feeling and the decisions they make. But I hope that what I've shared is useful to some of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much. Let me ask Michaela to speak next.
Hi, everybody. I was also very appreciative, and I also already learned a lot of things from Gabrielle and from Lauren to consider or reconsider. I think I had an inquiry maybe 5-6 weeks ago from a woman who I was surprised that she would consider new lessons, taking lessons with me during that period when we were just about to transition and considering into this phase 2 of opening, when the hair salons and so forth could open. And she told me something like, I am not scared. I'm also against vaccination. I'm very holistic. And that made me very aware that I had to put practices together that are right for me, and that I cannot let my students' different levels of anxiety activation and concepts decide what I'm gonna do. So it's about, that's my responsibility to set something up that I can share with everybody, and that I fully understand that not everybody can come to my space right now under the present conditions. And as many of you have already said, the states are very different, and everybody's personal health and anxiety situation determines eventually if they are going to offer a lesson or come to a lesson. And I just want to put out, because the chat room is a little activated, that none of us who are teaching is doing this lightly, I think, or interested in, you know, like spreading this horrible disease. And I am, as Lauren said, I'm personally not very anxious, but again, this is still me putting up guidelines that would make sense for those people who are feeling comfortable to my teaching space. This being said, I have yesterday started a new person who is very young. I am very impressed with the young people in their 20s putting their masks on without questioning. The older people sometimes, you know, say like, I don't know. So the basic situation, so I was considering turning my screen around because I take right now the summer months as a chance. I have a very, very large space here that also has a very high ceiling and a skylight window. And I can open the screen door and ventilate that room very well. I have one person on whose voice I'm working, and we can easily be more than 6 feet away. And for that time, I am working only with a face shield and then not the mask. Both together is very uncomfortable if you are speaking, for me. So they wash their hands, even if they assure me that they just showered before they left their houses. And you know, this is the kind of thing that I'm saying. You need to put your schedule together so that everybody and yourself knows what is safe. I told them about my room. I told them how much I have been taking care of my health, that I have not been sick, that I have no antibodies because I donated blood. I wish I had antibodies. I told them about the protective equipment that I wear, either a mask or a face shield. I told them I would not wear gloves. I told them that my clients would be spread out sufficiently so that I would have space to clean the room, but there is so far not enough interest in lessons that I have more than one client in person per day. I gave them the option of spacing their lessons out more, of course, you know, taking 10 or 14 days in between, or, and I teach a lot more from a certain distance. And I think that's a kind of benefit that we are having now by enabling them to direct and take out our words and do some of this work themselves. And I agree with, I think, Lauren, right? And even if you're in the same room, maybe Gabrielle, you said this, even if you're in the same room and you just stay away a little bit, I see so much more in a table situation than if they are on Zoom or some device. They have the choice of choosing and then also paying for a shorter time. So if they say, hey, I'm happy to be there with you 30 minutes and so forth. But nobody has taken any of these options up yet, except for spacing out their appointments, which is often just by, you know, schedule. I think that are more or less my contents of this letter that I wrote to everybody. And if a new person applies, signs up, is interested, then I send out that email. And I believe, since this first person who made me think about having to put together guidelines, she has in a center, of course, afterwards my guidelines for reopening, and she has postponed And now she has said, I'll stay with my chiropractor for the time being. And I think she's really not responding well to some kind of, you know, the rules. I said, oh, good, you did actually something for me. You helped me to think this through. And it's good that you are choosing to go to someone else.
Thank you, Michaela. I'd like to pass this along to Ruth, and I'm seeing the time, but I would like to assure Ruth that she has as much time as she needs. And with everybody's permission, I'd like to extend our chat to at least 3:15.
Thank you, Cheryl. So I think Cheryl asked me because she had seen the letter I wrote when I closed down, which was about March 12th was the last time I taught. And my letter said, I'll teach online if you want. It's not going to be the same. And a few people said yes. And I've also had 2 new people that started out online, one way out of state who wanted to try me because she kind of knew me rather than looking for someone local. And then another local person, we've been talking about it. I'm just saying that because when, let's see, June 22nd, I'm in Western Massachusetts. We're a small area and all the colleges, you know, student population left. So we're really not very many people here, less than 35,000. And we have one of the lowest incidences of positive cases or deaths in the state. We're probably 3rd lowest. And its 2 adjacent counties are the 1st and 2nd. Not counting the islands. So I haven't been teaching online as much as I was teaching in person. And there was one of the people who was working with me online who asked to come in person 2 months ago or something. And I tentatively said yes, but I said, you will have to be home for 14 days before you come to me and your husband, and I will do the same. And then what Lauren was talking about, I just felt too fearful. And I kind of said, you know what, this is not really legal yet in Massachusetts. We have to wait. June 22nd, Massachusetts went into phase 2 of part 2 out of 4 parts. And in phase 2, personal services close contact was allowed to reopen. And I took that to mean Alexander, and I checked with other colleagues and they agreed with that. I only reached out to those people who had been working with me online. I knew what their behavior was. We had a continuing connection. Part of it was the interest. Now that you've had online and you're getting something out of that, what really is going to happen with the hands? So it wasn't just about safety, but about the hands. I told them they'd have to leave everything but their car key in the car. There's not a question of public transportation around here. They're going to drive. Some of them are bringing in a phone or something. I give them Purell because I actually don't want them to get farther into my house. The teaching room is just next to the front door. I put on my contacts because I would fog up with my glasses. I put on my mask. I put on my face shield. And actually my hair is up so that it's out of the way and not dragging down. This is not the chair I use for teaching because it's a little sloped. I have another chair, but for both of them, there's a pad. So I take a sheet, I put it on there. Not a sheet, but a pillowcase. I take the pillowcase, I put it in there. So if they're dropping any personal things, it goes on the pillowcase. When I give them chair work, it's kind of the same setup. This does get kind of foggy, but it's worth it to me. I am taking risks, but only one a day. And my most vulnerable student, who's the oldest and has Parkinson's, there's a gap of a day before he comes. And he writes to me what he's been doing in the past week. I tell him, and then he says, see you tomorrow. You know, that's how it's been going so far. When we started phase 2, that was June 22nd, I was actually in quarantine then because my husband had come home a week before. So I only started July 2nd. So it's been just 2 weeks since my first student. And I've had also a little increase in people coming into the house, repair people, construction people. And I've had one haircut, and that's all my personal stuff. But things are increasing all over the place. But I still know that if something happens to me, I have a good sense of contact tracing. I know that in my county, we've had 1 death in the last week. That's pretty darn good. But I also know that the college kids are coming back. I'm going to go to England for 4 weeks because my husband's back there again. I'm going to quarantine for 2 weeks when I get home, and that'll be October before I could even start, and I will have to see what happens. If things keep on the rise, I might not teach at all again. I might only continue with the people that I'm working with now. I have no intention at the moment to open my doors so that I would have to deal with all of this more than once a day. That would be too much for me. Things that Lauren and Gabrielle said, you know, as soon as the student leaves, I've got the Lysol wipes, I'm washing cleaning the doorknobs, I'm putting everything in the laundry, I change my clothes, I've washed my hands, I'm washing my hands several times a day. And it is hard to say, you know, are we acting out of something I've always attributed to Confucius was, man does not get run over by a streetcar in the middle of one's kitchen. So it's true. If I never go out, if I never teach in my house, that'll be a much safer environment than the one that I'm choosing now. But I'm also dying inside, not having the contact and not doing the teaching. And so for me, at where I live, these risks are okay to try. But I totally respect those who would never consider this until everybody's vaccinated. And I just hope that you can also hear and not shun us, those who are starting. Thank you.
Ruth, thank you so much. And thank you, Lauren, Michaela, Gabrielle. I would like to entertain questions. If you have questions or anything that you'd like to say, address any one of the people who spoke today, please feel free. Rose, go ahead. Rose, did you have your hand up? Go ahead.
I did. I just had to unmute. Okay. I just wanted to offer that I have begun teaching very little in person, but I also have the training course in person. And we do not speak when we have hands-on. That's the only thing I have not heard anyone offer. And maybe that is what other people are doing, but we're not speaking when we have hands-on. If we have something to say, we step away a few feet, you know, at least 3 to 4 feet and speak. And if the person who is being worked on has something to say or ask, they just indicate that they do, and then we step away. So I just wanted to offer that as an option for people as well.
Great, thank you.
I like that very much. I think this is something to consider. I said in my letter also that I will speak less during a lesson. It's hard for me. That's a habit thing. But I was making a conscious decision yesterday with this new person that when I work on top of his head, that I will not say anything, and that I can, as other people have said, step away to have a conversation or explain a concept or ask something. Yeah, Yeah, there's so many good variations that actually help us to rethink, I mean, me anyway, my habits of teaching.
Thank you. Jennifer, go ahead.
I know in New Hampshire, they have required that people that are in close contact with other people, such as massage therapists, hairdressers, etc., are tested every 2 weeks to ensure that they don't have the virus. So I don't know what other states and counties and other situations, but you should definitely check that out.
Thank you. Megan.
Hello. I have taught a couple of lessons outdoors. I have a space outside of my home, and at this point I'm only inviting people, as some of the other teachers said, who I know well, and I trust that what they tell me they're doing, they're actually doing. My main question was, will it be possible for the people who've written these letters and made these consent forms to share them so that we can learn from the kinds of things they included? Is that something people might be willing to share?
Yes, I think that Gabrielle has very graciously offered to have those posted on our,
Okay.
our website. And for sure, I think that we can share these ideas, whatever people are willing to share on our member side of the website.
Megan, where do you live? Where do you teach?
Do you mean my physical location or my state? I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana. Our case count is rising, but it is still below 10% infection rate. Whoops. And sorry, our case count is rising, but it is lower than some other states, and I'm just evaluating it day by day, and I'm not meeting anyone in an indoor space, partially because the studio space I have available was a fairly non-ventilated space in a shared building.
I have taught one lesson outside and taken photos and put it on my newsletter, and it would be a different thing to get used to in Connecticut. You know, the weather changing, and the humidity is high, and only in the afternoon would there be shade, and it is a whole other ballpark of moving targets. That's why I was curious where you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had very hot afternoons, so I've taught only in the morning.
Yeah. Thank you. Suzanne, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I was wondering, I saw on a forum, someone said that stats is not allowing in-person teaching. And I didn't know if that was true or not. So I thought maybe AMSAT would know what stats position might be.
I'm not aware of that.
I think that's true. I think that's true for STAT, but that might have to do with England. I believe I saw an email about that recently. They're not teaching yet.
Okay, Rose has her hand up. Go ahead, Rose.
Yes, I think England's situation has a lot to do with their insurance there. So I think that's the main reason STAT can't allow their teachers to teach yet, is because of their much more connected into their national health system than we are.
Okay, thank you. I want to gather as much information as possible for my own decision, so I wanted to check in on that.
I believe that that Claire is, I think that Claire Crease is on the line here. She might be able to speak to that, but I have been in touch with her. She's our affiliated societies liaison, and has really collated what the various societies have done I'm going to work with her so that we can really inform everybody as to what's going on with the affiliated societies. So perhaps
I have it. I have it here. I have the email. I can forward you the email.
From STAT?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. But as far as the all of the affiliated societies, we're going to sort of canvas that and share that with our AMSAT membership.
Great, wonderful.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? This is an ongoing discussion for sure, and let's.
I mean, I haven't opened the links, and just for your information, I'll just read this for right now, which just says that the government has announced that it is allowing close contact work to operate in Northern Ireland from the 6th of July, and England from the 13th of July. I don't know if that's changed, and there are links to open. So,
okay. Well, thank you. Let's consider this an ongoing dialogue and conversation and sharing as things unfold. And again, I am so grateful to Gabrielle, to Lauren, to Michaela, to Ruth for sharing their experiences, and to Jeremy for initiating this conversation, and to David Owen, who shared with us the recommendations for the Canadian Society. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Gabrielle, who has a finishing piece here. Gabrielle?
Okay, I keep forgetting to unmute. Does everybody want to stand up? Get out of your chair. So in the interest of just taking in a lot of information, we started with doing a little bit of movement, and we're going to end with a little bit of movement. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Developing Self Alexandrian Education Program, pioneered by Sue, Mary, and Judith Kleinman. So I'm just including some of these little movement sequences just so that we can let all this information kind of come into our bodies. We can let it percolate. And then as Lauren and Michaela and Ruth and everybody else has been sharing, your best decision is your decision. So hopefully you've heard some common threads through all of this. And as Cheryl was saying, it's an ongoing discussion. So as you're standing here, just take a moment and connect with the ground. And find your back, sending your back and up. And your head forward and up. Are you seeing? Are you breathing? And this is called the 3 swings from Judith Kleinman. So I would just invite you to just let yourself turn and twist around your spine and let your arms swing freely. They might even just kind of slap and come across your body. And staying aware of your head, neck, back relationship. And then as you just come to a close, let that reverberate inside you a little bit. And I don't know if you can see my feet. Hold on just a moment. Oops, sorry about that technology glitch. Can you see my feet?
Yes.
Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're just going to pivot on your heels. So you're doing the second swing on your heels. Head, neck, back, staying connected to the ground. And then just let that complete, come to a pause. And reconnect, head, neck, back. And now go ahead and pivot on your toes. Same thing. And then just let yourself come back to your center. Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gabrielle. And let me just turn it back over to Maggie.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. We have talked about sharing a lot of information, and I just want to point out a couple of places on our website for you. We do have the special Taking Time to Connect page on the members side. And this is where you will find all the recordings from our chats and ancillary information. I just want to show you, we already have on the July chat, we are going to post the form that Gabrielle is using after we get the recording from our chat. But we also have additional resources, which includes a lot of great information for you. And perhaps most importantly, I want to send you all to the community forum. We had multiple people who were not able to attend today, but they emailed information on what they are doing. And we're going to be posting those in the Teaching Questions and Practice Buildings tab. We've got one topic, how are you reopening your practice? And another one, best practices for post-shutdown teaching. I encourage all of you to feel free to put comments on those two topics, to share your information with everyone else as we all make our own decisions. So thank you so much for joining us today. We have 2 more Taking Time to Connect this month before we take our August break. I'll just remind you, you do need to register for each session. We're going to have one session hosted by the Slogan Committee, and they're going to talk about the process that they went through and some of the wonderful information that they got from outside sources for us. And then the Judith Lieberman Scholarship Fund Committee is going to be closing out July with a presentation on the 30th. So thank you again for joining us, and hope to see you next week.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.